Okay, so I'm gonna. Amy, for fuck's sake, get out of here. Excuse me. Get out. Out. Fuck off. So, I'm back. Harut. Ha! Your Vane's first again. Congratulations, Vane. I'm glad for you. So I just had to get rid of a dog that decided to start barking at something. So that's might give someone a heart attack if they watch this on replay. Okay, so we got a few people, and so before we start, I think all of you who actually are here, but if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I would appreciate that very much to help the channel grow a bit. And yeah, if you haven't signed up for the free membership site, you can find the link later on when this is posted. You can find the link to that in the description, or you can go to the main channel page and well done, permaculture pagan. And you can look where the banner is, the channel banner. There is a button there that you can click to join the free membership site as well. Oh, Vane, you have to be better to both like and be first to comment. So how I'm going to do this today, because I feel like my brain is a little bit scattered and there's a lot of information that I have in there that I need to get out. So I'm going to talk first, and you are free to ask however many questions you want, and I will try to scroll back and just answer the questions when I'm done. So otherwise, I think it's going to be chaos. I'm probably going to forget half of the things that I want to say. So that's what I'm going to do today. It's a bit too complex for my own brain. Maybe I've had too many sweeteners in my life. So that's basically what I'm going to talk about, what artificial sweeteners do to our brains. And first, I just want to say that artificial sweeteners, there has been quite a lot of research on some of them, not so much on others, but mainly there's actually on the health effects on your body. How long is my talk? Well, I'm going to try to not make it more than half an hour. Hopefully 20 minutes, but I'm not entirely sure about that. If you don't have time, you can watch it later. You can ask a question anyway. I'll answer it when I'm done. So, and now I answered the question even though I had started. So anyway, so a lot of the research that has been done on the health effects, and there's a lot with gut microbiome, and obviously since it's going through the guts and that sort of thing. I'm not going to talk about that because I could probably talk for 15 days about that, but I'm going to focus on what's actually going on in the brain. So one thing that a definition or a word that is called, or that people use, which is excitotoxins. That just means that it's a class of chemical compounds that they bunch them together and they call them excitotoxins because when we consume them, when they hit the tongue, basically, when we can taste them, they are telling our brains that there is a lot of sweet coming in, whether we actually taste the sweet or not. So this is the case for MSG, for example. We perceive it as sweet, even though it's not actually sweet. It just stimulates the brain. And the same thing goes for all artificial sweeteners and also natural sweeteners like stevia, for example, would do the same thing. It would also be classed as an excitotoxin. So I'm probably not going to use this word, but if you read it anywhere, that's what it means. So if it's a general thing that is going on, then you know that that's what's actually happening, and that's the kind of class of chemicals. So most sweeteners are used in much, much smaller quantities than sugar. So you have anything from about 200 to 13,000 times sweeter than sugar sweeteners. That was a very strange sentence. So we don't need to eat as much. However, the sweetness response that we get is the same as that for sugar, and that's how we kind of have made that. So we compare everything to table sugar, which is sucrose, and that consists of one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. That's what sucrose is, basically. So when we are eating any type of artificial sweetener or even something like stevia that is much sweeter than sugar, we do get, I want to put a little reserve thing here because I'm going to mention this later, but we do get a similar response in the brain with regards to dopamine, but not all brain areas light up. And if you are never ever consuming any artificial sweeteners at all, you might actually get a lower dopamine response in your brain from consuming them the first few times you do it, but your brain will pick up on this pretty quickly. So your brain will adapt, or I would like to say that it destroys itself over time. So I'm going to use MSG as an example, even though it's not a sweetener, just because it's a very good example. So we have something called the glutamate system in our brain, which is a signaling system. So MSG stands for monosodium glutamate, and glutamate is an amino acid that naturally occurs in the food that we are eating. It's part of most protein sources. But the thing with MSG is that you are obviously getting a lot of it, and you're getting it in high concentrations, and you're basically getting flooded with glutamate. And on the cells, we have two different receptors that it can bind to, and they are called NMDA and non-NMDA receptors, and that stands for aspartate. And these two receptors are doing the same thing but for different ions. So basically, they're opening up ion channels, and they're letting lots of positive ions into the cell at once. So if you have a lot of glutamate around, you're going to have it bind to a lot of receptors on your cells. So they're going to open up, and you're going to have a huge influx of positive ions, and this will create a lot of energy straight away into your cell. And this would cause a lot of oxidative damage and so on. So if this happens once, probably not a huge problem, but it's not ideal. But if it's happening over time, over and over again, because you're eating MSG, or aspartame has the same sort of effect on your brain cells, then what's going to happen? Your cells are basically going to burn out. You're going to oxidize them to death. You're going to destroy them. So this is probably why there are studies on both aspartame and MSG that shows that the risk of stroke and dementia goes up massively when you consume these things. So they basically destroy the neurons in your brain. So I said that glutamate is naturally occurring, and it's all good normally. If you're having normal amounts of it, that's what it's doing. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter, so it kind of excites the nerves. It's yes, it's poison. I shouldn't read the chat. It kind of wakes you up, if you like. And to balance that, we have something called GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, which is the opposite. So it's kind of a calming neurotransmitter, if you like. So that's why many people are maybe taking GABA before going to bed if they're feeling very jittery. So when we have these in balance, we are kind of balanced people. But when you have too much glutamate as well, you can get very, very, very anxious and feeling like you can't relax. And then the opposite is true for GABA. If you're having too much GABA and not enough glutamate, you can feel very depressed. So there could be an imbalance between them if you're having either of those. So they're kind of the opposites. But they're meant to, if we're consuming a normal diet, we're meant to actually get, balance of these amino acids, and happy days, there's no problems. But when you're eating MSG, for example, you just get way too much. So aspartame, which you might know as, NutraSweet, Canderel, it probably got a lot more names than that just to sell it. It's a huge one, and there has been a lot of research on it. I still don't really understand why it's allowed, but here we go. Follow the money, I guess. So aspartame consists of two amino acids, which are naturally occurring. There's nothing wrong with them either, just as glutamate, and that is aspartic acid, or aspartate, which is the ionic form of it, and phenylalanine. The problem with aspartame is that it breaks down. So you have the amino acids, and they just basically separate from each other and become the free form of the amino acids at a temperature of 30 degrees Celsius or 85 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So which is much lower than the body temperature. So when you eat them, they will separate into their amino acid form. And this in itself can be a problem, but they will also release one molecule of methanol. And methanol is quite toxic to the body. So both methanol will form formaldehyde, which is obviously, that's what we're using to embalm bodies, and it's really, really toxic. So both formaldehyde and aspartic acid are basically classified as brain toxins. And these will also oxidize your brain cells, basically, and destroy them. So, in my opinion, don't go anywhere near aspartame ever. The only sweeteners I do consume every now and then is erythritol and stevia. I don't think either of them have a negative brain effect like this, but I'm just saying that they might not be ideal either. So don't take that as advice that you should go and start consuming those. So I came across some information that I thought was interesting. I think this information might be slightly outdated, but so take it with a pinch of salt. But there used to be anyway, 75% of the adverse reactions to food additives reported to the FDA was with regards to aspartame. And the most common were headaches and migraines, and some people said that they got fat from it, and linked to depression and all that sort of thing, which they have been doing studies on, and says that it could be true. But some people have actually reported seizures or death. Whether that is with regards to if that is true or not, I don't really know. Sometimes people are just catching on to this. Oh my god, I ate this and I have a headache, so it must be that, because I know other people have. So it might be a little bit overblown, but it says something. And one sweetener that I wanted to have a look at was sucralose. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a lot on sucralose with regards to the brain. I know that I'm not really doing well with sucralose at all. It just literally goes straight through me, and I need to sit on the bathroom right after. So I figured that is a nasty one, at least for me. So sucralose is just table sugar, basically, but instead of on the carbon chain, you have OH groups, usually, which is like hydroxyl groups, and you just replace them with chlorine, 3 of those. So that makes the sucrose, or the now sucralose, metabolically inactive, so you can't digest it at all. It would just go straight through you. It's probably not very good for your gut microbiome. But what I did find out was actually someone who's doing some research on sucralose a few years ago, maybe around 4 or 5 years ago. He actually found it for sale in Japan as a pesticide. And after that, I went and looked around a little bit, and it seems like people are actually using sucralose to get rid of black ants. So I'm going to try that myself if I get black ants here. They were a problem where I lived before, and I wish I had known that then, because I would have tried it out, because I found that quite interesting. So clearly it's not very good for ants, but we're not ants, but I don't think that is ideal anyway. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sweeteners as a general group now, and not pick on any specific one, because that would take forever if I was doing that with all of the sweeteners. But the brain reaction to real sugar compared to that of artificial sweeteners is not always the same, but will very quickly become the same. So, and that actually doesn't really matter if we can taste the sweet taste or not. Our brains and our bodies are still reacting to it. So we are obviously evolved to react to sugar in a certain way, and we're evolved to have a dopamine release to promote us to eat more of nutrient-dense foods. And artificial sweeteners do not have any energy. So that's kind of in itself a brain error. So something I find really interesting is that after consuming artificial sweeteners, people experience less pleasure, which should decrease their appetite. But as in terms of when something is not as pleasurable as sugar, you should prefer sugar and you shouldn't really want to eat more. So if you're having a steak, it is nice, but it's not super pleasurable. So you will just eat until you're kind of full. But it doesn't have that effect with artificial sweeteners. Instead, people tend to eat a lot more. And they are actively seeking out very nutrient dense foods than people who consume just normal sugar, or if they're not consuming any sugar at all. So this is why some people gain weight when they are eating artificial sweeteners, because there's a huge brain error going on there. So what's happening is that we're actually triggering it's like a conserved starvation pathway in your brain, basically. And that makes nutritious food, this is what it does originally, it makes nutritious food taste much better when you're starving. So it just enhances the taste to get you to eat more of it, to get out of starvation mode. So when you eat a non-caloric sweetener, an artificial sweetener, and you get this sweet sensation, and the part of the brain that lights up is the one that has to do with your taste. You have a lot of other brain areas that light up on sugar, but they don't actually light up when you are eating artificial sweeteners. So it seems like the brain either favors sugar or it favors energy together with the sweet taste. So only part of the reward center is actually lighting up and being rewarded, and that it has to do with the taste, and that will get you the dopamine release, but it's still something missing. So the brain will kind of figure out that the sweet taste is no longer a good way of measuring caloric intake or energy density of the foods, because that's what it does. And it favors those foods that contain a lot of energy. So when you have this out of balance for a period of time, this is not going to happen the very first time you do it, but it will happen fairly quickly. The brain will kind of recalibrate, and that is why we will want to start to eat more when we are regularly consuming artificial sweeteners. So how it should work is that if you're having, let's say, a donut with a normal donut with sugar in it, and you have one bite and you think, oh my God, this is so good, this is bliss. What happens is that you get the dopamine release and you will feel good and feel pleasure from eating it. And at the same time, leptin, which is the hormone that signals that you are full or you have enough energy, stop eating, will start getting released straight away. So there is a connection between the two in the brain. And leptin will tell you that, okay, we got some energy. So the second bite, depending on how quickly you eat, obviously, is not meant to taste as good as the first bite. And you can try this out yourself. For me, it takes more than 2 bites before I feel like the pleasure response is going down. But fairly quickly, you will start feeling or noticing that it doesn't really taste as good when you get to bite 5, maybe bite 6, and eventually it doesn't really taste that good to you at all, unless you're leptin resistant. In that case, it might be that you just think it's totally awesome and you just keep eating because your leptin system isn't working as it should. But at some point, you're probably going to get to that point anyway. So this is how it should work, so that we just only eating until satiety, until we have the energy that we wanted to have, and so on. So if this donut was sweetened with artificial sweetener instead, you would get a totally different response. So I'm going to tell you very quickly about a very small study that was done on 12 women. So they did a functional magnetic resonance imaging scan on their brain when they were drinking a beverage sweetened with either sugar or sucralose. And then they had also to rate the sweetness and how pleasant the drink actually was. So both of these brains, as I said earlier, they activated the response areas that had to do with the taste, but only sugar activated the other areas that are involved in the reward pathway. So what is happening, and I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but what is happening here is that you really do get a brain error. It's not satisfying to your brain, and it will just have to start doing something else. So what they can see is that people that are regularly drinking artificial sweetened beverages, they have a total different brain activation to sucrose compared to people who don't drink those kind of drinks. And that is actually a normal, over time, the whole brain will start to light up again. They have a normal brain activation response. So we're changing how the brain is actually working. And then these people also have the same brain activation, not for, I can't speak for all sweeteners, but this is for saccharin that they have been looking at, and sucrose, and they have the same response. And people who do not drink artificially sweetened beverages do not have the same response to saccharin and sucrose. So it's very, very clear that your whole brain is changing over time, and you will probably start favoring these artificial sweeteners. Many people do favor them. I know people who actually prefer them, and I've never been able to understand why, because I don't like the taste at all of those, at least not those sweeteners that they put into soft drinks, but I don't drink a lot of soft drinks. So what I'm missing in the research, and I don't think they're going to do any research on this, but I'm really wondering, what would it look like in the brain for those people who haven't eaten sugar in years, eating sugar and artificial sweeteners, and compare that to also something, a normal, really pleasurable food. And I'm wondering if there's even more difference there, if we are actually damaging our brains with sugar as well, but not in the same way, because sugar is so concentrated. And we know that we do. We know that we are down regulating, for example, dopamine receptors as a way of protecting our brains, but that's not irreversible. If you stop eating sugar, you will upregulate them again, and your brain chemistry will look normal. So I'm just a little bit curious about that. I haven't been able to find any answers to that question at all. So yeah, just some interesting stats, which may or may not be true. So people who drink artificial sweetened beverages are at 36% greater risk for metabolic syndrome, and they are at 67% greater risk for type 2 diabetes. And the risk is actually much higher compared to people that drink fruit juice every day, for example, which is also a very high risk factor. In rats, they have seen a lot of increased risk for bladder cancer, which makes sense because we are weeing out a lot of them. So that could be something that may or may not work in humans, who knows. And also when they're giving rats saccharin, I find this quite interesting. I haven't heard it for saccharin before, but rats were given choice of drinking water sweetened with saccharin or have an IV of cocaine. Most rats chose saccharin because it gives them a higher dopamine release. So that's kind of worth thinking about how addictive are artificial sweeteners, because we know that sugar is very addictive, but it seems like artificial sweeteners are really addictive as well. And obviously, there are correlations with hypertension and cardiovascular disease going up and all of that. I think take all of those stats with a grain of salt. They're looking at this, but then you might see it as people who are at risk for type 2 diabetes and they know about it. They might drink more diet sodas because they don't want to get diabetes. They don't want to consume sugar, for example, and that might be part of why the risk is increased so much and so on. So it's just interesting stats, I guess, but take it with a grain of salt. Don't take it as facts. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So I'm going to scroll through this chat. Hi, Steve. How about aspartame in Is That Such You Are My New amount that I will have no effect? I'm not really sure what you mean, Steve. How about aspartame? I'm wondering if you're trying to figure out at what level, how much aspartame you can eat without it having an effect. Aspartame, for every single molecule of aspartame that you are eating, and I'm trying to think now, the molecular weight is probably quite low because it's a small molecule, you will get 1 molecule of methanol. So even if you're having 1 gram, you will probably get an amount of methanol in your body, which will turn into formaldehyde and so on. Plus, you will have the aspartate or aspartic acid wreaking some damage up in your brain. So, I wouldn't do aspartame at all. I would still go with like stevia or monk fruit. There is actually, for those of you who are interested, I wonder if I write this down. Not there. Let's see. Let me have a quick look. There are, I can't remember what they call, if they call like the keto something. There's a couple that they were testing a lot of different artificial sweeteners, but they were only testing it to see if they affected the blood ketones and the blood sugar. And so they're not testing it for any type of safety, only from a ketogenic perspective, as in can I stay on my keto diet and still have these kind of sweeteners. And obviously aspartame is one of those that are safe. It's not safe, good for that. So it depends on what the question actually regards. You can YouTube it. It has many views, so you'll probably find it quite easily. Okay, Miss Pagan. My old man has seizures when exposed to the slightest amount of artificial sweeteners. Any insight into why that happens? Aspartame, sucralose, etc. Good question. So I did mention that seizures had been reported as one of the side effects from people consuming aspartame. So seizures are usually a brain neuron problem. It's a kind of overstimulus in the brain. So in terms of aspartame, that kind of makes sense because that's how it works. And as I said, I couldn't really find any information on how sucralose works in the brain if it does. So that's an interesting one. But when you're having a lot of cells and you get like this huge influx of positive ions into the cell that I was talking about, and you just excite them, what is happening is that all of the brain cells would just like fire at once. So if you have all these what do we call them, the brain wiring and everything is set up for someone to actually have seizures, it might be that things are just misconnecting and it kind of gets into an overdrive state. I can't give you a mechanism for that, how that happens, and I'm not really sure anyone has actually done any research on that. They would probably want to prevent that as much as possible, but that's probably what's going on there. Harut, what do you know about monk fruit? I guess not monk fruit, monk fruit. Monk fruit, it's supposed to be, it's kind of like stevia, and it doesn't have an impact on blood glucose, which is fine. It's a natural sweetener. It's not an artificial sweetener. If you want to eat that and it works for you, I say sure. I would classify it as in the same class as stevia, that it's generally safe for most people to consume. If you're doing well on it and you want to use it, then use it. Be a little bit careful with any type of sweeteners. If you haven't watched my video that I did with Troy, who was one of my clients, and we had to take him off artificial sweeteners because he had swapped his sugar addiction for artificial sweetener addiction, and that was actually even when we started, he never really felt, oh my God, I need to eat sugar. It was, oh my God, I need to eat this, which contains artificial sweetness. So sometimes we condition ourselves to think that artificial sweeteners are safe because they don't spike the insulin and they don't have all those kind of effects on the body that sugar has. So it's safe, but we start just consuming a lot more of them and we're pretty much obsessed with them, and then we have a dependency on them instead. So if you can consume it with, without going overboard, I say fine. And if you feel good, even better. Okay, so Milk says that she's using monk fruit and it's better than others. Good. Awesome. I haven't tried monk fruit myself. I think it was quite expensive when I was looking at it many years ago, so I just stuck with stevia, which is expensive as well, I guess. Fapnado, I've always said anything more than 3 bites of dessert is a gluttony. Well, okay, I'm very guilty of that then. Necrokitty, I rarely use sweeteners, usually honey or stevia. My erythritol hasn't been touched in months. Okay. I mean, honey is sugar, so if you don't want to eat sugar, then obviously honey isn't the best thing to eat. But, if you're using a teaspoon here and there, it's not going to kill you. Xylitol, they say it's as sweet as sucrose, but with somewhat less calories. Okay, so xylitol is not quite as sweet as sugar. I think xylitol has 80% of the sweetness of sugar or something like that. So it's close. But the thing with xylitol is that so sugar has about 4 calories per gram of sugar, and xylitol has 2.4 calories per gram. Whereas erythritol, for example, has 0.2, so it has a lot less. So the thing with xylitol is that it gives you half the blood sugar rise compared to sugar, since it has quite a lot of energy in it already. So it's a sugar alcohol. So you will metabolize it. It will have a blood sugar effect. It's not safe in that regards. And my only issue with sugar alcohols is with regards to the gut microbiome, and we don't really know enough about that. But I do think that anything that goes through that is undigestible will eventually cause a problem, especially if you're eating it regularly. So that's why I used to do xylitol. I moved over to erythritol, even though I don't do that very often. I can't remember when I had it last. I used to have it in my bulletproof coffee, but I stopped that a few months ago. People are often having GI issues on xylitol and or erythritol. I find that with xylitol for myself, not so much with erythritol. So, depends on what you want to do with it. Personally, I would rather just do a little bit of sugar if I had to do that. But I'm very skeptic of artificial sweeteners or sweeteners in general. But I'm still using stevia. What if you taste aspartame but don't ingest it? Usually when I chew some gum, which 99% of them have aspartame or ACE K, I try to spit out the juice as much as possible. So why are you chewing the gum then? Vane, Keto Connect. Yes, I think that's them. Thank you, Vane. So if you YouTube Keto Connect, you will probably find that couple that they're literally sitting on camera eating these sweeteners. It's horrible. Okay, so the thing is that even if you try to spit it out and there's some aspartame in there, you will probably swallow some of that, I'm afraid. But even so, you still get that sweet taste on your tongue, so you will get the whole brain cascade going, and you might even get a mismatch in your insulin release, because when you taste sweet, your body will start creating insulin, and that will start storing your blood glucose. So if you're not eating anything to restore your blood glucose, you will quickly become low in blood sugar, and that is also a brain error. Something has gone wrong here. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were supposed to get some energy with this. So there's a lot of things going on. Okay, Zach, so what the science says, do sweeteners spike insulin or not? Okay, so I wish that the Keto Connect people had actually looked at the insulin as well. I think, from what I have read anyway, that some sweeteners in some people spike insulin and not in others. So that's a very, very individual thing, unfortunately. So for me, stevia might work very well, and I don't get insulin spike or anything on blood sugar. So when I watched this Keto Connect video, I can't remember which sweetener it was, but it was one sweetener for the girl or the woman in the video that actually after consuming that her blood sugar went down. So they didn't mention this, but what probably would have happened, unless it wasn't with a lot, but what could have happened is that her insulin was spiked, and therefore it started to store the glucose that she had in her body, and therefore her blood sugar would go down when consuming this sweetener. So I think that that is a very, very individual thing. So what the research has shown is that different people do react differently to different sweeteners. So even if the glucose doesn't go up, your insulin might still be released. So I'm sorry, but I can't answer that question because I think it's very individual. Ultimate guide to low carb sweeteners blood testing. Be sure to avoid these three. Let me have a quick look. I'll go on another tab and see if that is what it is so that we can sort that out. Yes, okay. Yes, that is the one. So I'm wondering if I can copy the link address like that and paste it in here. So that's for those of you who are interested in seeing what happened to their ketones and their blood glucose when they just sat and ate that with a spoon, and also how it affected their inside. Has Bart got a hangover? Possibly. I'm not really sure. He's not up yet. Bane, what are the three? So the three, I think I can tell you, I think I wrote that down somewhere. So since they were looking at the blood sugar, what they wouldn't do is obviously xylitol because it gave them a blood sugar rise of probably about 50%. Maltitol, which is another sugar alcohol, also increases that. And what else was there? I'm not really sure. There was probably a third one. I can't remember. So watch the video instead. That would be more accurate. Okay. I'm worried about using any sweeteners at all due to candida and repairing bad digestion due to raw veganism years ago. When I go zero carb, I am more irritable and cranky. If I'm having kefir or yogurt, my mood is better. Okay, then I think you should be doing that. So that's probably something with competing with the candida in your gut. So you are just adding some beneficial bacteria to your gut, which will outcompete the candida. And if you remove them, the candida gets a chance to actually grow much more and take over. So that might be what's going on there. So it could be that if you are getting a better, gut microbiome in the future or a healthier one, then that will go away on its own without you having to do the kefir or yogurt. But keep doing what you're doing. If it works, don't change it. Not now anyway. You can, if you want to stop it in the future, you can always try to remove it and see what happens. Okay, Miss Pagan. I like honey as my sweetener, but only local raw. I don't like the taste of tropical honey. I'm avoiding cane sugar, which was my old go-to. Too many carbs, though. Yeah. Okay, cane sugar is interesting because that's literally brown sugar, and that's something that I have been known to consume with a spoon when it's in my cupboard. So that's something that I rarely buy. Well, I'm not really eating sugar anymore, only when I decide that I'm going to do it. But that is one of the dangerous ones because it tastes really, really nice to me anyway. Yes, good job, Itchy. No artificial sweeteners. The thing with artificial sweeteners is like When we have sugar, that is obviously an extract of a plant that is naturally occurring, but it's so concentrated that it's not good for us. But with artificial sweeteners, we're creating compounds that shouldn't be in our bodies, that are not absorbable, and they just, makes us feel horrible and causing a lot of GI upset and so on. So why on earth are we putting ourselves through this? I don't really know. So many people are scared of consuming some sugar sometimes, or they're scared of getting fat or whatever it is, but I don't think it's worth it. If we assume that the human diet is pure carnivore, why would we evolve to have sweet taste receptors? Okay. Because that's one of the tastes that are naturally occurring. Our sweet taste receptors are, so back in the days, if you found any apple or anything, it would have a very minimal sweet taste. It wouldn't be as an apple is today. And the same goes for berries. And berries generally are less sugary, even though they have some fructose, obviously, and berries are really nice most of the time. But they're also getting engineered to have more sweetness than they used to have. So the thing is that we are designed to seek out anything that has energy in it, whether that be, is pure survival. Am I saying that you only have to be 100% carnivore? I think that we are opportunistic creatures. Just because we might function best on a meat-based diet doesn't mean that we wouldn't necessarily go and seek out other things that we could actually survive on. So if you are failing to catch your mammoth of the month to feed your tribe, what are you going to do? You're going to go and seek out other ways of getting energy, which might not be ideal, but they will keep you alive. Doesn't necessarily mean that this is the ideal thing to eat. I personally don't think that having a few berries or something in season is a huge problem. And it might be that that has been necessary for us to survive. And in autumn, you're just getting all of these fruits and berries, and you're just meant to, stock up, getting fat, and survive winter, because you're not going to be able to hunt as much. Doesn't mean that that's the ideal food, but it did allow you to survive because you could get fat on it. Do you want to be fat? That's actually the question I got. I actually asked in the most of you know about Cole Robinson and the snake juice diet, and I was a bit curious about the baking soda because I had heard different things. So I was asking, why actually does Cole say that we should add it? And because I don't like the taste, and I'm actually mentioned that, and that was a mistake. So I think it's just an attitude people take in there because of Cole himself. But I got the reply that it's for to prevent kidney stones, and who cares about the taste? Do you want to be a fat bastard, or do you want to be skinny? And I thought, why on earth do you assume that I'm a fat bastard because I'm asking this question? So that, yeah. Anyway, so do you want to be fat and eat berries, or do you want to be skinny? No, I'm just kidding. So it might not be the ideal food anyway. Thallium gum isn't sweetened. Okay, never heard of thallium gum. Okay. Okay, what do they mean when they say that it's a low glycemic sweetener like coconut sugar? Okay, so the glycemic index is basically a measure of how much glucose response you get in your blood over a set period of time. And usually use sucralose as a base, or sometimes they use actually white bread, which is a higher GI. So it's the response of glucose from a certain amount of food, a certain weight of this food. So if we are, I can't remember how much it is. If it's, let's say it's 100 grams, just for the sake of it. So if you're eating 100 grams of sugar, what will the blood glucose response be after a set amount of time, compared to if you're eating 100 grams of white bread, or if you're eating 100 grams of carrots? Then you will have the glycemic index as in a response. The problem with the glycemic index is that it's highly variable between different people. And not only that, I will get a high, let's say I get a high glycemic index response, or I will end up really high on this scale if I am eating a cupcake, whereas someone else will maybe be halfway to mine. And then we are having chocolate, 100 grams, and it will be the opposite. So just because I'm having a high response to one food doesn't mean that I necessarily have it to another one, which is also high sugar. So our bodies respond in very different ways. So I think it's kind of an indicator of how quickly your blood sugar should be rising. But I think there is a lot of people that don't fit that model for those types of foods, or some foods might be correct and some are not. So I do not like using that, but you can kind of look at it as a general guideline, I suppose. But something that is more interesting is probably a glycemic load, which means how much glucose will you get into your blood at any time after consuming this food, and not just how quickly. As a general rule, say you picked up a full-fat yogurt at the shop and it had 3 grams total sugar per 100 gram. What would you think about that ratio? So that is 3% sugar, probably milk sugar. How much yogurt do you eat? You might be eating 300 grams of yogurt. That's 9 grams of sugar. That will pass on a ketogenic diet, for example. It probably still allow you to be in ketosis if that's what you are looking at. And if that's the only only sugar that you are eating at all, during the day you don't eat any more sugar, you're probably safe. If that is added and you have some berries with that and you're eating other things, maybe worse. But yeah, I don't think 3 grams per 100 grams is much. But again, it's just how much are you eating? Some people can eat a kilo, and then we have 30 grams of sugar, and that is a lot. So, can Candida use honey, or would its antimicrobial properties kill it? Okay, so the thing is with honey is that if you are eating it, it will go through your digestion systems. I don't think that a lot of the antimicrobial activity will still be there once it actually goes through. So I do not think that honey would be the ideal thing to consume for Candida, no. Zach, I've been using baking soda as well, but I'm going to ditch it now and increase the salt. According to Cole, it was more about taste. Okay, good, because when I'm doing an extended fast, I do add some baking soda to my snake juice still. Otherwise, I'm just drinking water with the electrolytes in, because actually my taste has accustomed to that, and I think pure water now tastes really strange, so I always just drink that. Miss Pagan, I prefer tart or sour fruits like strawberries and lemons. We grow heirloom varieties of produce, so they tend to be much less sweet. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't, this is my channel and this is my opinion, so don't take, I know many of you are obviously coming from Bart's channel. So in my opinion, I mean, they don't really present a problem for me, so I'm still going to eat them. If I find, we're out and we have here in New Zealand, in autumn there are feijoas everywhere. I found figs. I didn't actually go and buy any berries last summer, but I don't have a problem with eating that. It's not like I'm feeling like I'm getting hooked on strawberries. I can eat a lot of strawberries in one sitting, maybe, but it's not like a packet of cookies or ice cream where I'm eating until I'm always ready to, throw up. So if I'm doing that every now and then, I don't think it's any problem, unless I do get a problem for it. It might not be ideal from a nutritional or health perspective, but if I don't experience any problem, I would rather have it. I think it's a trade-off that I'm prepared to pay, and I think, my opinion is always that people should have the information that they need to make their own decisions. Is it worth doing it, or is it not worth doing it? If you get swollen joints after eating strawberries, or you get a rash, maybe not eating strawberries is a good idea. Maybe you can eat blueberries if you really want some berries. But everyone has to kind of make their own decision. I'm not getting any negative side effects from eating a little bit of fruit here and there. I haven't had any fruit for, I don't know, 6, 8 weeks maybe. I remember having an orange a while back, but it was a while ago. So because it's winter now and there's nothing to pick out here, and I could go to the supermarket and buy it, but I'm not. It's nice, but it's not sugar to me. It's not table sugar, and that is what I'm addicted to. So I haven't really heard about anyone being addicted to fruit. I think it's hard to be, but some people like fruit. At Vay, no Pepsi Max for me then. Cancer drink. Yes, please don't do that. Stop the soda entirely. It's unnatural the way that we are drinking a lot of calories that doesn't exist in nature. I think that is so much worse than eating your calories or sugar. How does the fiber syrups affect the body? Same as erythritol. Fiber syrups? Are you talking about the like chicory root or whatever? I'm not sure what it is that you're talking about, but in that case, they are undigestible, so they will not raise your blood sugar, and that's a good thing. They are probably fairly safe, but I would also, again, as you say, since they're not digestible, they might mess with your gut microbiome. And that's kind of my main concern for those that are generally seen as safe is what are they doing on their way through? Because sugar feeds our gut microbiome, other things feed other species of it. But what do these things that we're not designed to eat, what do they feed? Or do they just kill certain ones? So sucralose, for example, I mentioned that it's been used as a pesticide. What's this pesticide doing to our microbiome as it's passing through? Does the microbiome think that it's sugar and start digesting it, and then something happens? I don't know. Okay, the natural stevia is green powder. I wonder how much more insulinogenic the white version is. Okay, yes, so the white powder. The thing is, I actually didn't think about this before, but I've heard some people on Bart's live stream say that they react badly to stevia. And I have always bought the 95 to 98% stevia extract, basically, because they taste better. But there are lots of, if you go to the supermarket, usually they have something else in there. So it might be some sort of sugar alcohol mixed with stevia, or sometimes erythritol and other things. So when people say that they don't react well to stevia, maybe it wasn't a pure product. Maybe it had thickeners or other things, just bulk agents to make it look like sugar, so that you can dose it the same way as you're dosing sugar, because that seems to be a thing. And I never thought about that before, but I'm kind of wondering about that. The thing is, Zach, if you are getting the same sweetness response from the amount of stevia that you're using, whether it is the extract or the ground up leaves of the stevia plant, you're probably consuming the same amount of stevia or steviols. There might be some effect, protective or not, from the actual plant matter. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I'm just kind of guessing here and bullshitting, really. But sometimes it might be bound to something else, and it might affect your body in different ways. So it's kind of an interesting question. Is there a site listing all the sweetener and thickener codes on labels? Yes, there is. I'm not sure where, and I don't even know if it's different in America than other countries. I think many of them have the same codes. So okay, so yeah, so you can just Google something like sweetener codes or E-number index for artificial sweeteners, for example, and you will probably find a list of everything. So most numbers have an E E250 or E590 or whatever it is. And then you can, usually they're categorized into sweeteners or other things. So you can just go to the sweetener categorization and have a look at that. Okay, so that was that. And we've been live almost an hour. That's very excessive, but it's cool. 13 people here, many questions, so that's a good thing. So do you have any more questions? Otherwise, I'm going to pop off and wake someone up and see how he is. We don't yet have a home insulin blood test yet. Okay, the problem with insulin is that it's not very stable. It degrades very quickly, and I think it's when it degrades, I can't remember exactly what it is. There's a protein being released anyway. I think they call C protein or something like that. I can't really remember. But anyway, so usually when you do a blood test, that is the protein that you're looking for rather than the insulin. And I think that maybe it's slightly complicated to get it right if you are building like a home test thing with it, unfortunately. Okay, NecroKitty, a scientist YouTube guy putting different sweeteners in water with active yeast. All sweeteners, even stevia, reactive and bubbled. Stevia was the least reactive of all of them. I have all sweeteners since seeing that video. That's really cool, NecroKitty. Thanks for that, because I haven't heard about that before. Anything else to watch out for similar to artificial sweeteners and MSG? Okay, I would go and kind of be careful with a lot of food dyes. I don't trust them either. Some of them are natural, some are not so natural. What else? If you're staying away from processed foods, you're not going to have this problem, pretty much, because we're not really adding food dyes to our own food, are we? Okay. Get Bart out of the bed so he can make some videos for us. We'll tell him that you said that, Zach. Just going to be boo-boo. We'll watch the replay hopefully tomorrow. Okay, Deborah, thank you for popping in. It was nice to see you. C-peptide. Yes, that's probably that. Thank you, Francisco. I thought about growing stevia. I haven't added it to my plant collection yet, though. Yep. Yes, so the C-peptide. Yes, that's probably correct. Not C protein, C-peptide. There you go. I got the C right anyway. Okay, so that's it, and we're almost up to an hour. So I will probably be back next Sunday, if that's a time that works. Well, I'm kind of experimenting a little bit with times and days and seeing what's working. So thank you all for being here. If you haven't subscribed yet, just do that. And if you want to quit sugar, then join my free membership site. That's also awesome. And yeah, that's it. Thank you, Zach. I'm the bomb, apparently. So awesome. Take care and see you soon. Bye.